let's say you're buying your first house. So the banks have a thing called first home buyers and also for primary residence. So the banks are willing to lend a lot more money for people that buy their first house because they know it's their first house. So they'll lend up to 100, 110% sometimes to cover your transfer duties and things. They'll lend you 100% or more to finance that purchase. When you want to buy the second one for investment purposes, and I'm assuming now you're living in the first house, when you want to buy the second one, then you've got to go to the bank and they're going to say, okay, but how are you going to pay for this? So hopefully your salary is now increased and they can take security, or you've saved up enough money for a deposit. Because on the second one, they're going to want usually a deposit, 20%, 30%. It depends on the deal. They're going to do an assessment to say, okay, the rental in this area is this, what's the value of the property, and the key is also not to pay too much for a property, because the banks do their own valuation. They're going to say, okay, we see properties in this area are selling for R1 million. If you come to them and you want to get 1.2 million because you offered 1.2 million to buy the property, they're not going to lend you that 200,000 Rand extra. Even if they were going to, and they're probably not going to lend you the million. They're probably going to say, okay, we think properties are worth R1 million. We'll lend you 60% or 70%, maybe 80% of that. So they'll lend you 800,000. But if you go to them and you say, hey guys, I picked up a great deal here. It's a friend of mine. I've negotiated that this property is worth R1 million, but I can pay 800,000 for it. Then the bank will maybe say, okay, we'll lend you the 800,000, or you have to put less deposit in. So it depends on the value of the property. They call it loan to value. So they value it, and they'll give you a loan based on the value. And the more properties you buy, they reassess on each case. But then you've got to put a tenant in on that property, and then you have your rental income. Then if you do well, if the rental income is very strong, you're making a lot of money, you can go buy your second property. You go to them guys and want to buy another one. I've got extra money coming in. It's costing me 100 grand a year. I'm making 150. I've got 50 grand extra. And I've already saved up a year's worth of money. I've saved up 600,000 Rand. I want to buy the next one. And that's how you do it. They'll assess everyone on a case-by-case basis. But once you've proven to them that you understand how to do this, how to play this game, and that you're a person they can trust, then the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth property you buy becomes a lot easier with them. But the first 5 years are critical, that you don't make a mistake. If you bought the properties, you got the debt, you've got a relatively large amount of debt, you wanted to start paying off the debt, but you also wanted the property values to start increasing. So after 5 years, you're sitting in a position where you've already got a lot of equity or value that's yours. If you had to sell the properties and pay off the debt, it'd be a nice profit for you after 5 years. You want to be in that position. So the first 5 years is very critical to buy the right stuff. And if you buy wrong, it's a problem. If you buy something, like we discussed previously, not a good property and it's not a good investment, the rental return, is not right, it's a bad way to start. So cherry pick and look for good deals. Good deals where you can make good money. That's the key. Can I talk about one thing I wanted to mention?
Yes.
Being beholden to debt, And that's something that I've seen, that fear is something that I've seen, it's a common thing. Not just for debt, I think it's broader for taking a chance. Because taking on the debt is believing in yourself, believing in the deal, taking a chance on yourself. You're going to be able to do this. So it's fear of taking a chance, fear of the unknown also if you haven't done it before. But when people say I'm scared of getting in that situation, there's yin and yang, there's opposites, there's cause and effect. There's always two sides to a coin. So if you've got to look at the cost of not doing the deal. Okay? And that's the thing that's always scared me throughout my life. I'm young. Not as young as I was, but relatively young. The way I look at it, if I had to go do a deal, and today it's a bit different. I've got a family and children and things like that. I've got people that depend on me. But if you take when I was in my late 20s, earlier 30s, 31, roundabout, before I had a wife and kids. Or even if you still have a wife, but before you've got kids and they're older and you've got a lot of costs associated with them. But back then, and to a certain degree still today, if I had to lose everything because I made a mistake or the property market turned or a business deal went bad, I'm still young enough to stand up again, you know, and learn from my mistakes. It's very valuable to fail because, you know, you learn from that, hopefully, and you can stand up a lot quicker. If it took you 10 years to get something done the first time, it'll take you 5 years the second time, 2 years the third time. So you see that often. You see these multi-billionaires a lot of the times in America, but I've seen it lots in any country, where something goes wrong with the guy's business and he loses everything. And that guy, within 5 years, he's back on top. You know, because he knows he's already done it. He's got the formula on how to do it. So the point I'm making is, if you don't take that chance, the risk that people don't see, and that's like a silent killer, it's coming slowly, following you throughout life. The risk you take is not achieving what you wanted to achieve in life, and ending up when you're old with not being financially secure, or as well off as you could have been, and just because you were scared. So if you don't take on the debt, in most instances, yeah, you can have a good life. You can be conservative. You're never going to be beholden to debt. But you might get beholden to other things. You might not have enough money to do what you want to do in your later years. You might not have enough money to retire. You might not have enough money when your kids need to go to college. All because you don't want to touch debt. So you've got to be very careful. I don't want to be beholden to debt, but I don't want to be beholden to other things later on. So for me, it's always been an easy answer, but for most people it's not. People are scared of the now. They don't want to be beholden to debt. If you don't do the deal, what do you miss? You miss a potentially wonderful life by doing the deal. So you've got to weigh up the risk and the reward. So they call it opportunity cost. You know, if you don't do that opportunity, what are you giving up? So you've got to manage that. You've got to say, what is the maximum I can lose? You know, if, let's say you buy a property and you're taking out a loan, you're getting 800,000 Rand loan, and the property is $1 million, you put on 200 grand. Now, let's say the market crashes. The property is not going to be worth zero. Okay? I hope you don't ever use debt to buy an asset that's can go to zero. But the property is never going to be zero. Let's say the property falls by 50% in value, which is very hectic. I mean, that's economic crash. Goes from $1 million to 500,000, and the bank comes and they rip it out and they sell it on auction for 500,000 Rand. You owe them 800. Okay? So they get 500 back from the auction. Now you owe them 300 grand. So that's your worst case scenario. You're in for 300,000 Rand, and you would have lost your 200 grand, but that's, you know, whatever. But you would owe the bank 300,000 Rand. Now, look on the other side. Do the property, buy it for $1 million. 10 years later, it's worth $2 million. You know, you've paid off a third probably of the debt. You don't owe 800,000 anymore. You owe, my maths isn't that great, but let's say you owe 600,000 on the property. 2 million minus 600,000 Rand, 1.4. You've made 1.4 million upside. And your risk is 300 grand. You know, so you've got to look at it that way. What's the worst that can happen? And then what's the best that can happen? And see whether it's worth doing or not. People don't look at that.